an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Grant Shapps resigns from the government over failing to stop the alleged bullying of young Tory activists that's blamed for one of them killing himself. Good evening. Grant Shapps has resigned as International Development Minister over the alleged bullying of young activists when he was party chairman, saying the buck stops with me. However, the current party chairman, Lord Feldman, is resisting calls to quit from the parents of Elliot Johnson, who killed himself in September. His death blew the lid on allegations of bullying, sexual abuse and blackmail among young Tory activists drafted in for the election campaign. Gunned down in Turkey, a top Kurdish human rights lawyer we interviewed just a month ago. Tonight, there are angry protests on the streets. Writers and artists around the world unite to express outrage at the sentencing to death in Saudi Arabia of the poet Ashraf Fayed. And facing a shortage of organs for transplants, Wales will now regard everyone as a donor unless they opt out. The government has suffered its first damaging resignation as Grant Shapps resigned following allegations of bullying in the Conservative Party and the suicide of a youth party activist in September. Mr Shapps stepped down over events alleged to have taken place while he was co-chairman of the party during the election campaign. Jane Deeth reports.
Grant Shapps has resigned as a minister over claims he didn't take allegations of bullying in the youth wing of the Conservative Party seriously enough. Bullying a young activist complained about before taking his life.
The Conservatives over their time in government have built over 200,000 new affordable homes for people.
Elliot Johnson, a young Tory blogger, claimed he was bullied by the party's former youth organiser Mark Clarke, seen here with Grant Shapps. Mr Clarke wanted to be an MP, but after complaints about his behaviour in 2010, he was struck off as a candidate. Even though Grant Shapps knew of the concerns, he gave Mr Clarke a key role in the last election, running the road trip, bussing young Conservatives around the country to campaign in marginal seats. Young party supporters have apparently made allegations against Mark Clarke, including intimidation and sexual assault. He strongly refutes them all. Grant Shapps' predecessor as party chairman, Baroness Varzi, says she wrote to him in January with concerns about Mr Clarke's behaviour. Today, Mr Shapps said his office received no written allegations before the election, but in his resignation letter he said he was taking responsibility. Mark Clarke has been banned from the Conservative Party. Today, David Cameron promised an inquiry into the claims of bullying and said he felt deeply for Elliot Johnson's parents.
It is, an appalling loss to suffer, and that's why it's so important that there's a proper coroner's inquiry. In terms of what the Conservative Party should do, there needs to be, and there is, a proper inquiry to ask all the questions, to interview all the people who've come forward. That will take place. There's an independent lawyer from Clifford Chance who will oversee that process and make sure that it reaches clear conclusions from the evidence that comes through.
Elliot Johnson's parents, Ray and Alison, had been calling for Grant Shapps to resign. Mr Johnson now wants an independent inquiry into the bullying allegations. The internal party investigation is, to his mind, a cover-up. It's a sign of how serious the allegations surrounding the Conservative Party are that Grant Shapps has given up his job in the cabinet. There have been negative headlines before, when it emerged he'd used an alias, Michael Green, to write self-help guides for a website he ran with his wife. But he stayed an MP and stayed in the fold. This is far more serious. Allegations young Tory supporters were bullied and abused by someone more powerful than them, and the party didn't do enough.
Well, joining me now from Tunbridge Wells is the Conservative commentator and radio presenter Ian Dale, himself a former candidates, and this is really revealing something quite dark, it appears, in the Conservative Party. I mean, are we any nearer what actually happened?
No, I think there's a lot of revelations to come on this. Often when there's a ministerial resignation, you think that's the end of the matter. I think this is far from the end of the matter. Interestingly, Grant Shapps wasn't party chairman when all of these allegations were originally made. So obviously Number 10 are trying to protect Lord Feldman, the current Conservative Party chairman, but I don't think his position is safe at all yet.
I mean, the parents of Elliot Johnson last night called for him to resign as well. I mean, why do you think one of them has gone but the other has stayed?
Well, Lord Feldman is a very close ally of David Cameron, so it's not surprising that the Prime Minister will want to sort of circle the wagons around him. But I think there are lots of questions that Lord Feldman has got to answer, not least to give Ray Johnson and his wife some sort of closure on this. They clearly they aren't satisfied with the resignation of Grant Shapps, and there are so many questions that lay unanswered, particularly surrounding some deleted emails and other emails which apparently exist that show that maybe Lord Feldman knows a little bit more than he's letting on.
What about the inquiry? I mean, you know, should it be external, independent, or is the current sort of internal job okay?
Well, I think it's very difficult to judge that at the moment until we see what this internal inquiry says. There are lots of suspicions that it's going to be a cover-up just because the person leading it is a close friend of Lord Feldman and David Cameron and wants to be a Conservative candidate. So you can see why people are suspicious of it. But maybe it's too early to judge that yet. We have to also remember there's the coroner's verdict to come, and also there are two police inquiries, one with the British Transport Police and one with the Metropolitan Police. So I think it's probably a little early to judge that one, but in the end I think the wishes of Elliot Johnson's parents have to be paramount here, and if they're not satisfied with what's happening at the moment, and they're clearly not, and understandably so, then I think there has to be a case for looking at the setup of this inquiry and maybe widening it and maybe making it a more independent inquiry.
Well, what is it about young Conservatives? I mean, the Conservative parties have different problems over the decades with youth organisations, whether it was student organisations or this one more recently. I mean, is there something exceptional about it, or do you believe this goes on in all political parties?
I think it does happen in all political parties. All it takes is one bad apple and it sort of rots the rest of the organisation, and that's what's happened here. So it seems, I mean, we have to remember that Mark Clarke says he's completely innocent of all of these charges. So, but in a sense, this isn't confined to politics. Bullying, sexual harassment goes on in all parts of our society, and we both know it goes on in the media as well. So we mustn't just think that this is a political phenomenon. It's all over the place, and it needs to be countered.
Ian Dale, thanks a lot.